In the southern Slobozansky direction, aerial reconnaissance operators from the Strix Company of the 4th Detachment of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine are systematically reducing the combat resources of the Russian occupiers. Thanks to precise strikes by FPV drones, 5 pieces of equipment and communication antennas have been destroyed, and 3 enemy combat positions have also been hit. Meanwhile, border guards from the Phoenix unit have inflicted serious damage on the Russian army in the Luhansk region. Ukrainian FPV drones tracked down and destroyed a tank, a cannon, a UAV control point, and a checkpoint belonging to the Russian invaders. Trucks, vans, and special equipment belonging to the Russians were also hit. In the Lyman direction, the Russian army launched attacks on Ukrainian positions in the areas of Zelina Dolina, Kaladaisy, Mern, Torsky, Yampol, and Hryhorivka. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian occupiers tried to push back the defense forces in the areas of Vladimirovka, Nikonorivka, Novoekonomik, Rodinsk, Rodivka, Zvariv, and Udakny. In the Novopavlivka direction, Ukrainian defenders stopped Russian assaults in the areas of Tymarivka, Voskresenka, Zeleny Pol, and towards Kamishivka.
Today, we noticed that in the Pokrovsk direction, there are almost single-person assaults, one person at a time. But they're happening all along the front line in different places, not lined up in a chain, but in a way that distracts attention as much as possible. Maybe someone will get lucky. You know, like in a lottery, whoever gets lucky, some make it, some don't. But, using the resources we have available today, as they say, right? So, we track each one, and until we get them, until they're either killed or wounded or surrender, our attention doesn't let up.
There, on the Pokrovsk front, the Ukrainian National Guard unit Spartan is doing everything it can to repel attacks by the Russian army. Aerial reconnaissance spots groups and individual Russian assault troops moving toward Ukrainian positions around the clock. After that, drone strike operators get to work, successfully eliminating enemy personnel. Defense forces are increasingly using not only flying drones on the front lines, but also ground-based robotic systems. According to the General Staff, the volume of cargo delivered to the front line using ground-based drones has increased by more than 80%. Unmanned systems are already supplying Ukrainian defenders with ammunition, water, and equipment, helping to save soldiers' lives. For example, it is these unmanned ground vehicles that help the 210th Separate Assault Regiment of the Ukrainian Armed Forces carry out defensive and assault missions in key areas of the front. The same ground drones are also being used by the Ukrainian Armed Forces for reconnaissance, defense, or fire support on the battlefield. The video shows tests of the Ukrainian ground robotic system called Droid. It can perform reconnaissance functions, and if necessary, provide fire support to the infantry. The vehicle is equipped with a 12.7mm caliber machine gun with an ammunition load of 420 rounds and a targeting system featuring artificial intelligence elements for automatic fire correction.
According to estimates by the Ukrainian Military Command, up to 15,000 robotic systems are expected next year. This demonstrates the high level of integration of the Ukrainian defense industry into the overall Ukrainian and European security system. This involves the exchange not only of experience, but also of advanced technologies with leading European manufacturers.
Over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces have eliminated around 790 Russian occupiers. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Russian army has lost more than 1,071,000 soldiers in total. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 66 artillery systems, 1 multiple launch rocket system, and 124 units of automotive and special equipment belonging to the Russian occupiers yesterday.
And now joining our broadcast is military analyst Oleksiy Hetman. Oleksiy, good evening. We're glad to welcome you live on the Freedom TV channel. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Good evening.
Oleksiy, let's really start our conversation today with what's happening on various fronts, with the information recently released by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine that the defense forces are making progress in several directions. Let's break down what's happening where, and what the prospects are for this situation to change.
Well, our actions are going more or less successfully in the Sumy direction. There, we've managed to advance, according to various estimates, by at least 2 kilometers. Some say it's about 2.5 kilometers. Now, that might not seem like much, but it's a counterattack. It's our advance, not just a halt to the Russian offensive. It's a stop, and, well, in the opposite direction, there are negative developments for them. The situation there is more or less successful, but this can be attributed, firstly, to the fact that the Russians initially concentrated such a number of troops and equipment there that it didn't give them any real hope of advancing toward the city of Sumy. No matter what they say on their propaganda channels, no matter how much Putin puffs up his cheeks, there were no more forces and resources concentrated there than in other directions, except, of course, for Pokrovsk. There, the concentration is off the charts. And why is it that in the Sumy direction and the North Slobozansky direction they could have advanced, but not in others? So it was more like a diversion. Now they're pulling out from there. That's the first reason. There weren't that many there to begin with. The second reason is that, according to some information, troops are being withdrawn from there, not on a massive scale, but partially, apparently, to the Zaporizhia direction. The Russians apparently want to concentrate their forces and resources there. It seems they're preparing for something. And the third, main reason is that we have the right tactical actions, motivation, and, of course, the capabilities of our armed forces. If you take the average, so to speak, then naturally, the quality of our armed forces is much higher. And the only reason we're not winning on a large scale is simply because there are more of them, the Russians. There used to be a good saying, they don't have a strong army, they have a long army. That person was right. It's exactly a long army, meaning it takes a very long time to destroy it. Other directions. And finally, of course, about Pokrovsk. Other directions of the Kherson-Zaporizhia area, well, you can't really combine them like that. It's the Kherson direction and the Zaporizhia direction. There, most likely, maybe towards the Russian Dnipro group, maybe towards the Kherson direction, or maybe even to Crimea. Today, a Russian train was moving with Wellpro, with well products. And near Tokmak, before it reached the city, they managed to intercept it, set it on fire, and it burned down completely. We know that when gasoline, diesel, or any kind of fuel and lubricants catch fire, it's almost impossible to put it out. You just have to let it all burn out. They'll be repairing the railroad there, so most likely nothing will be moving along it for a while. And in the Lyman direction, there was an attempt to cross the Oskil River. There are different transcriptions. In Ukrainian it's Oskil, but it's also translated as Oskol or Oskol. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe you can tell me which one is correct. In Ukrainian, it's Oskil, but in Russian I've heard both Oskol and Oskol. Well, let me know later if you remember. There was an attempt there. Well, some offensive actions, but they didn't really succeed. And then the third thing, what was it, 86 or something? Well, about a third of the fighting, 60, I think, was the count. A third of the fighting along the entire front line was happening precisely in the Pokrovsk direction. There, the Russians, well, we remember that salient of theirs that formed there. We sent in reinforcements there, I mean north of Pokrovsk, Bobrapil, and for the most part, that salient, well, just a small piece of it was left at the very beginning. The rest we surrounded and destroyed. And the enemy keeps pushing forward, concentrating. Commander Sersky mentioned 111,000. Eyewitnesses who are directly involved in the fighting there, well, mid-level commanders, cautiously comment that it could be up to 200,000. Well, maybe they've brought in some more troops there. Again, moving along the front line, let's note, this is an important point. The number of forces and resources they have, well, manpower, let's put it that way, on the front line isn't increasing. If it does increase, it's only slightly, maybe by 0.5%, maybe 1%. So if they've reinforced somewhere, it means they've weakened elsewhere, or gathered from everywhere. They're moving troops along the front line. So, when we talked about the Zaporizhzhia direction, in order to reinforce there, it's not like they're pulling reserves from Siberia or the Far East or wherever. They're not bringing in some supposed reinforcements from there. They're actually moving troops from the Sumy direction. And as for Pokrovsk, the distance between the pincers around Pokrovsk is about 15 kilometers. Well, give or take, depending on how you measure it, from the gray zone, from which salient to which, it's about 15 kilometers. And that distance isn't getting any smaller, the ring isn't tightening. But we've already discussed this with you, and we've gone over it in quite a bit of detail. If the distance between the northern and southern Russian groupings, the ring, shrinks to less than 10 kilometers, say 6 to 8, then basically, those are exactly the conditions described in military science and combat regulations. Troops need to be withdrawn so they don't end up completely encircled. Because 6 to 8 kilometers is exactly what's considered a tactical encirclement, or rather, an operational one. And, at that point, well, you really have to pull back, because the likelihood of a complete physical encirclement increases dramatically. That's why we believe, or rather, we hope, that we'll be able to hold Pokrovsk. We've been fighting there for over a year. But we have to be mentally prepared and calmly accept the possibility that if we don't have enough strength and resources, and the enemy, once again, according to Sersky, according to scientists, 200,000. That's unbelievable. Then it's better to pull back and save our people and equipment, rather than hold out to the last moment and then retreat in a disorganized way. A disorganized retreat of troops usually leads, I don't even want to bring up Avdiivka or Volodar, but just according to military science, it leads to a multiple increase in losses for the retreating army. That is, it could be twice as many, maybe even more than double. So, an extra 2 or 3 days in Pokrovsk, they just won't make a difference. It won't give us anything, but if we retreat in an organized way, it will save more people and equipment. Of course, we're not just retreating. It's not like we're opening the gates for the Russians. There won't be any free zones for them. We're moving back to other positions, which I'm sure have already been built and fortified. We heard this from, well, at least from representatives of the local military civil administrations, that yes, private construction companies were also involved there, because the engineering troops alone can't build such strong, powerful fortifications by themselves. Those troops have a different purpose. So, that's the situation on the front line in a nutshell. Thank you for such a detailed breakdown of this situation. Now, in the context of the meetings in Washington that took place recently, the Russian Federation continues to shell Ukraine, targeting peaceful cities, and continues shelling on the front lines. It's becoming more and more intense. And now the entire international community is saying that, obviously, Putin is not interested in any peaceful settlement at this point in terms of a ceasefire. So here's a question for you. How can the world put pressure on Putin to achieve this goal? And here's something else that's interesting. When Trump asked Zelensky what kind of help was needed, Volodymyr Oleksandrovich replied, everything. And in the context of this question, an additional part of my question is, what does everything actually mean? What is it that we urgently need right now for the front in order to defeat the Russian Federation? If they are refusing even a temporary ceasefire, then what exactly are the tools of pressure we're talking about? So the questions here are about how the international community should respond and what kind of weaponry would also help. Well, at this point, there's practically no talk of a temporary ceasefire anymore. The Russians there were conditions that all negotiations with Russia would start about peace, about certain territories, about anything at all, about NATO, whatever. Only after a truce, only after a ceasefire on the front line. The Russians, well, they kind of think they're smart and that we're all just dumb. You know? Oh, I can't remember who said it, but it's really unpleasant to watch someone try to show off their intelligence, especially when they don't have any. So the Russians responded by saying, no, we don't want a truce, we want a complete, all-encompassing peace right away. so we'll keep shooting. All right then, we heard you, we get it. So, you don't want it. Then there was talk about a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, and then a three-way or four-way meeting. Well, a three-way one with Trump, so Zelensky, Trump, and Putin, and maybe a four-way one, meaning Zelensky, Trump, European leaders, and Putin. That would be the right way to set it up, not the chronology, but rather the order of priority. There are, well, some diplomats whom I sometimes get the chance, let's say, I'm lucky, to talk to, who believe that most likely the Russians will try, they'll plan to disrupt this meeting, to prevent Zelensky and Putin from meeting face-to-face at all, and if they do allow it, then most likely Putin will try to provoke him into some kind of conflict. Unfortunately, they're good at this, shifting from a constructive conversation to an emotional one, and then, of course, blaming our side, saying that we're the ones who don't want peace. And even if the first meeting between Zelensky and Putin does happen, the next meeting, whether in a trilateral or quadrilateral format, the Russians will most likely try to avoid. In various ways. They'll come up with something, somehow. Honestly, I don't even want to imagine right now that they won't think of anything. Although we can more or less guess, there will be some talk about peace, about something else, about history, maybe even about the Pecheneg. Basically, nonsense will start, something unconstructive. What we need is to talk about the possible end of the war. Well, you know, the whole delegation, let's say, the European one. When talking with Trump, understanding his position, understanding his relationship with Putin, well, none of the European leaders, except maybe Fico or Orban, call Putin a friend. But Trump keeps saying, my friend, my friend. But I honestly don't think he's a true friend to Mers, or indeed to Starmer, or to Montemaro. Lord, sorry. I got completely and utterly lost in the extensive and ever-growing list of prominent European leaders. All right. Most likely, most likely, they just wanted to play along with Trump. So, basically, he sees the situation as one where you have to negotiate, and obviously everyone wanted to show, yes, we trust you, we understand you. We'll do as you say. That's some pretty subtle diplomacy. Well, both France and especially England, the UK, have a strong tradition, a good school of diplomacy. So, in fact, this is a setup for Trump. It's strange that he didn't realize that. I think he's more sensible than that. But that's just my personal opinion. Nothing that we're doing now, or that all of Europe will do and propose, will Putin actually do. And then our entire European team, together with our president, well, I think it might not even be them, but most likely, halfway through, the United States itself will start asking this question. Like, okay, Mr. Trump, you've shown and explained how things should be, how you see it, great, 10 out of 10, and all the rest of what you've been saying. We did what you wanted. We thank you, said thank you. So, what happened? Nothing happened, and you and I both understand that nothing will come of it. And only after that, when it becomes, as they say, obvious even to a hedgehog that nothing is going to happen, then, most likely, Trump's position will change. He'll be forced to change it against his will, against the grain, but he'll have to. And that's when we can expect serious sanctions against the Russian Federation, as well as the supply of weapons. By the way, regarding arms supplies, we've already heard from President Zelensky that one of the security guarantees, well, there were 3 components, includes at least 10 Patriot systems and the ability to purchase at least $100 billion worth of weapons from the United States. It seems these issues have been agreed upon with Trump. And, of course, a large sum, I can't say exactly how much right now, I can't recall off the top of my head, was mentioned for production, and for some reason, specifically for drones. I think this isn't to provoke Trump, because for security guarantees, aside from paperwork, we need about 1,000 Flamingo-type missiles that can fly long distances. That's basically the general idea, in essence, of security guarantees. Thank you for listening to all that. I managed to get it out, and thank you very much as well.
Oleksiy, I also think that another effective way to influence the Kremlin dictator Putin still works. Remember, last time we discussed long-range strikes? So, actually, something is blowing up again in Voronezh, and in Luhansk, long-range drones paid a friendly visit to the military warehouses at the positions of the occupation army. So I think this is still very much working. Oh yes. Oleksiy, thank you for finding the time to join us live today. Oleksiy Hetman, military analyst, was a guest on live broadcast on the Freedom TV channel.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.